Welcome to the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. As a surviving sibling myself, I knew that I wanted to share my story, my brother's story. I lost my brother to a homicide in November of 2016, and after going through this experience, I knew that I wanted to share my story and his story. It's time to share your stories now. The forgotten mourners, the surviving siblings, the story that is not told enough. Season 3 of the Surviving Siblings podcast is brought to you by sibsforever.org, a virtual platform for you, the surviving sibling, to commemorate and honor your sibling relationship. Visit sibsforever.org today to create your free profile and start building beautiful commemorative web pages that can include photo and video galleries featuring you and your sibling. Now, let's dive into the episode. I am so excited to kick off season 3. I have Audree Thurman Kropen here. A lot of you guys know her from season 2. If you haven't listened to those episodes 4 and 5, she is the founder of sibsforever.org and also a big part of the reason why we are able to do season 3. Audree, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Maya. I'm really happy to be here. I loved doing last season with you, and I'm looking forward to this season as well.
I am beyond excited to kick off the season with you. Loved doing episodes 4 and 5 in season 2 with you. Loved hearing about your journey as a surviving sibling, and then hearing about your journey as a grandparent who has a grandchild who lost their twin. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Audree, so you can kind of catch us up if you guys haven't listened to those episodes. Give us a little bit of an overview of your story, and then we'll dive into some of the topics we're going to talk about today.
Okay, so I did record episodes 4 and 5 last season, but I will summarize, and so we're all kind of up to date. My name is Audree, as Maya said, and I have been a surviving sibling for more than 55 years, and that is a long time. In episodes 4 and 5, I tell my story, which is long. That's why it's 2 episodes, but I'm going to recap it right now. I started my life as the youngest of 2 children, 2 girls. I had a sister from a fairly dysfunctional family. My sister, her name was Robin, and she was 2 years older than me. Robin was somewhere on the autism spectrum, autism being a word that was not really used back then in the 60s. And she struggled with awkwardness and anxiety with parents that pressured her to be someone that she just simply could not really be. So she was a very unhappy child. She passed away at 14 years old, very unexpectedly. I was 12 and in the 7th grade. Hours after she passed, my mother, who was then 40 years old, announced to a room full of people, many of them strangers, that she would try to conceive another child. And 5 months later, she was pregnant. The family dysfunction continued as we each tried to deal with Robin's death separately and apart. I was emotionally abandoned and suffered intense survivor's guilt. I transformed from this casual, kind of happy-go-lucky younger child into a driven, pressured, and emotionally numb, only living child. From 12 years old, when my sister died, until I left the house at 17, I really didn't grow emotionally at all. I didn't receive any counseling or support and really struggled in countless ways. After my brother was born, things got somewhat better because the spotlight was taken off of me and it was shared with him. But the pressure was still there. Robin's room was turned into a nursery, and she was rarely mentioned or spoken about since my mother did not want my brother to feel like he was just born to replace her. So this really only made things more difficult for me. After a very turbulent set of teenage years, I emotionally really kind of bottomed out. I started therapy, and this was kind of when I was in my very young 20s, and began to climb my way out of a deep hole. But I have to say out loud that therapy really did save my life. I went on to college, and then after that went to graduate school, married, and had 2 children. I named my eldest after Robin. She was a daughter, and her name is Bree Robin. She's now 41 years old. Bree Robin had twin children born in 2009, named Hayden and Brenna. 10 years later, in 2019, when Hayden was just 10 years old, he was diagnosed with a fatal brain tumor, 100% fatal upon diagnosis. And sadly, he passed away 11 months later, shortly after his 11th birthday in 2020. And this left Brenna at 11 years old, a surviving sibling, just like I was at 12 years old all those years ago. In addition to being a surviving sibling, I am the grandmother of a surviving sibling. Hayden's death was very triggering for me, and a lot of my guilt and anxiety came flooding back. I did resume therapy at that time in 2020 and have been in therapy ever since. I went as far as consulting a medium to try to get some sense that everything was kind of in a good place for Hayden after his death. And I found a lot of comfort in what she told me. And the basis was that Hayden and Robin were growing up together, and the time difference between their deaths really didn't matter. And that was very, very soothing for me. I started a nonprofit, which, as Maya said, is called Sibs Forever. And I decided after a little while just to walk away from my consulting business and focus exclusively on that, and focus also on my granddaughter, Brenna. And it's really these two things, Maya, that I want to talk about. My granddaughter, Brenna, how she's been doing, what she's been doing as a surviving sibling, and my nonprofit company, Sibs Forever. So about Brenna, her lead up to being a surviving sibling was completely different from my experience with Robin's sudden and unexpected death, right? She knew her brother was declining. She was there. And at some level, she knew he would not survive. She watched him just decline over these months very dramatically. At the end, she saw him unable to even move other than to flutter his eyes. So she knew. My daughter, Bree, and I spent a lot of time and energy researching clinical trials for Hayden. Even though it was 100%, fatal, you still have to try. And so clinical trials is the way to try. And so we spent a lot of time researching, and there really was only one that he qualified for, and that was at Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. So we traveled across the country. We tried hard to include Brenna in all this and hoped that she wouldn't suffer from what is known as the well sibling syndrome. And it really is a syndrome. I suffered from it myself. And it's what happens to the well sibling who has a sick sibling or a sibling who passes away. So it kind of occurs when the well sibling feels invisible, ignored, maybe overshadowed by the sick sibling, or defined by the sibling's special needs, if the sibling maybe is autistic or has some other ailments. Or it could be defined by parental grief following the death of a sibling. So it's that feeling of being invisible, that feeling of being overshadowed, that feeling of being guilty. I'm sure many of us listening to this podcast who became surviving siblings as children or while living at home with their parents understand what well sibling syndrome is very well.
But I just want to say this real quick though, Audree, because you are so spot on with this. I'm learning today, like I told you earlier before we jumped into the episode, I did not know about well sibling syndrome. So I hope that all of you guys are getting a lot out of just this first real piece of information, because this is the thing. This is huge. And thank you for defining that, Audree, because wow, I'm sure there's so many of you guys listening to this that are thinking, oh yeah, I went through this, and can connect with all of the things that you're saying, Audree. I just wanted to call that out though, because I had never heard that term before, but it like really clicked with me when you brought it up and then also defined it now.
So let me tell you what it is, at least how I suffered from it and how I've watched Brenna suffer from it. So when you have this, when you suffer from it, and we all, anybody in the situation will, it's, maybe the degree will be different, but everybody will have some symptoms of this. And it kind of means, at first you learn right away at a very young age. In her case, she was 10 when he got sick. It means that you learn that life is not fair, long before most other children have any idea that life is this unfair. It means that you become an expert at keeping your own problems to yourself, because you don't want to burden and stress your parents, because you're watching them and they are so burdened and so stressed. You don't want to add to that. So you end up keeping everything to yourself. It means, at least for me, it meant that I was resentful and angry. I really was. I was angry at my parents for being the kind of parents that Robin, not being the parents that Robin really needed. I think I was even angry at Robin, for making the family, causing the family to change in this way. So I think for me, that was a biggie. I think I suffered from low level, kind of a seething anger for a lot of my adult life that I did end up addressing in therapy. So, that resentfulness, that anger is part of well sibling syndrome. And, the well sibling, me and Brenna, watching our parents suffer and suffer and suffer more, are unable to talk about the sick sibling's illness or death or how they might feel about it. It's like the monster in the room. So you're silent. And, it's very suffocating. And it caused me and Brenna, I think, a lot of distress and unhappiness. And people don't understand it because they look at the well sibling and they think, oh, she's so lucky. Things must be so easy for her. But it just isn't true because it's really super hard to be the well sibling. And so, knowing that, we really tried hard to include Brenna. We didn't want her to suffer from this. Of course, no parent or grandparent would want their child or their grandchild to suffer from it. But, in some ways, we couldn't include her in everything, right? We were going to New York. We lived in an Airbnb close to Sloan Kettering for weeks at a time. And, she couldn't obviously pick up and be there for that whole time. So, we did what we could. And those things were, for one, we always spoke openly about Hayden's condition. We talked out loud about his prognosis, his treatment plan. We tried to keep her in the loop as much as possible with age-appropriate discussion, obviously. So she didn't feel like she was on the outside. And I think that went a long way. We tried to include her in the care plan. She did fly out to New York once and interacted with the clinical trial team along with Hayden. Of course, that was just that one time, and there was many other times, but at least she knew who the cast of characters were and kind of what he was doing, and having her there, I think, was very useful. One of the things that I did, and I mentioned this in the last episode, but I'm going to mention it again because it was, I think, so impactful, was I started reading out loud to both kids. I started this when Hayden first became ill. And initially, I bought books as a way for Hayden to learn about his illness and hear stories about how kids kind of found their way forward in fighting cancer. So they were, they weren't sad stories, but, stories were of bravery. And I would read them out loud. And then Brenna kind of got engaged in it. And he loved it and she loved it. So I started doing it every day. I would have like one book for Hayden, one book for Brenna, and one book that I was reading to both of them. From New York, I started doing it over Zoom and moved to using the Kindle Online for the daily reading. And so it was a really good way to involve Brenna from afar. Every single day, she was connected to Hayden and to us through this reading. So I think it made a big difference in terms of her being maybe a little bit less isolated and more in the loop. I think the one thing, Maya, that I would emphasize for parents of sick children is really to be extra patient with your well child. Sometimes, with a sick child, you might not have much patience left. And also, don't set the bar real high because your well child already feels so much pressure to be perfect. I mean, I absolutely did. I wanted everything to be perfect, so that my parents were not at all burdened by me. I see the same kind of thing, with Brenna. She saw her parents be devastated. So this goal of being perfect, making them proud and not being a problem is really quite a burden. So, the pressure of obviously to be perfect is self-imposed, but it's real all the same.
It's a part of the well sibling syndrome, I think, right? I think you described that beautifully. Yeah.
So, knowing that and knowing how challenging it is to be the well child, right? It's not easy. You want the bar to be low. You want to be okay with the well child acting out, letting them rage, yell, scream, whatever they need to do. And then just be patient and let that child know that you love them unconditionally, that your heart is flexible and can expand to include everyone, the sick child, the well child, everybody in the family. The heart expands. It's not like there's not room for both. And, just remind him over and over that the family will always be there for them, regardless of what happens. I mean, tragedy could happen, but the family will be there and they won't be alone and they'll be supported and they'll be in the environment that, where they're loved and valued. So, it's those things. But it really is a real thing. I mean, I could see it in myself, and I could just watch Brenna in the same way. We knew more, so we were able to, to help her more than, I was pretty much, pretty abandoned.
As you talked about, and I wanted to point that out, Audree, because again, if you guys have not listened to episodes 4 and 5, season 2, go back, listen to them, because this is where Audrey really talks about her experience. And this is why you're sharing as well. It's really, your experience was different than what Brenna is going through. And I think, although I would never wish this on anyone to lose their sibling and then also lose their grandchild, I think, things in life, sometimes they unfold for us and we realize why something may have happened, so that you're able to be here for Brenna in this way. And you have an understanding that no one else really in the family understands. You guys probably have quite a strong bond, which I know we're going to get into, but I think it's really wonderful that you're sharing her part and her perspective and talking about, what you wish would have happened for you during your time. And I know it was very complicated family dynamics, and there's a lot of us out here that know, raise my hand, know all about that.
Yep.
But I think it's a really beautiful thing. I mean, taking a situation that's a very dark and sad situation and helping the surviving sibling, Brenna, with your knowledge and giving her what you wish you had. And I think I get asked this question all the time, Audrey. I'm sure you hear it more than I do. It's from parents. Like, what do I say? How do I support them? And we're really uncovering that today on this episode. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I'd like to say more about that, because you're right. I mean, it's unfortunate that I had this experience, but given that I did, I really did try to do everything I could to make sure that Brenna's experience, was better in the ways that I could. I mean, I couldn't make it perfect, obviously, but I could make it better. So one thing, I suffered a lot of sadness and guilt from not being able to tell Robin how important she was to me and how much I loved her. I mean, she died very suddenly. I left the house. I was going to a play. I was dancing in Oklahoma, school musical. And I said, bye. That was my last word, bye. And then I came back and she was dead. So not being able to express my feelings out loud to Robin really left a huge unfillable hole in my heart. So Brenna, was going to have a chance to do what I wasn't able to do. And I really wanted her to have that chance to tell her brother, Hayden, in her own words and in her own way how she felt. And she probably didn't know at age 10 that she needed to do that. But at 20, she would look back and perhaps, really wish that she had. So, at 10, she didn't have the skills, but to extemporaneously do it. I mean, she couldn't just talk off the cuff, probably because she was a little bit shy and she just didn't have those verbal skills. She was kind of a young 10, kind of emotionally younger than Hayden. He was kind of the wise old soul, and she was sort of more like the brand new soul. So I suggested that she write a letter so she could think about it, choose her words, get comfortable with the words she chose. She could write it, rewrite it, rehearse it, and really get it to be the way she wanted it to be. And so she did do that. She wrote her brother a letter telling him what made him unique and special, and she read it to him shortly before his death. And I have this letter. I've kept it, and it's something I think that she will really value when she's older. And I have tried to share with Brenna some of my wisdom accumulated over all these years, 55 years of being a surviving sibling, including, how I found my way forward. And to that, she's basically asked, is this in our blood? Because her first thought is, okay.
Bless her heart. Oh my gosh. But I can see why she would say that, right? Or why a child would say that. I think that's great to share. Yeah.
Yeah. She thought we're genetically predisposed because she never knew anybody, right, who had lost a sibling except for me. And now twice in our family. So what else could she really conclude? And although I did try to explain to her how the two cases really were quite different and were unrelated, she didn't believe me. So I think at some level, it really is just easier for her to believe that it was somehow preordained. I'm sure as she gets older, she'll change her opinion of that. But right now, that is what she thinks.
Right. Along her journey, she'll evolve. Yeah, like we all do. Mm-hmm.
So, I received no counseling, as I said earlier and in my previous episodes after my sister's death. And some of that was just my parents, and some of that was just the time. It was the late 60s. That was before Dr. Phil and Oprah and, before all the self-help books and, all the wide acceptance of therapy for this kind of thing. But today, there's a lot more known. And when I did begin therapy, years after Robin's death, it really did save my life, as I said. But my daughter's opinion was really quite advanced, and she embraced counseling and therapy right from the beginning. So she participated in both group and individual grief counseling right away for the family. But, it didn't really appear to be as impactful for any of them as I had hoped. I mean, I was so excited by it because it was so important to me. And then it really didn't kind of do all the things that I thought it would. And there's a few reasons for that, Maya. One was that this was during COVID, right? So the grief group was remote. It was taking place over Zoom. And I'm not sure that that's the same. I think, I've had a lot of therapy over the years, and I'm still in therapy now, that, for me, it's the idea of being in the same room with somebody creates more intimacy and bonding. And I think there was some limitation, especially for Brenna, sitting in front of a screen.
Yeah, being that young, for sure. Absolutely. I agree with you. There's something about in person, especially when you're dealing with something like loss and grief. And it's and you want to have a deep topic, and you want to have that connection. I don't know. Maybe we're old school, Audrey. I don't know, but I don't know. But however you get your therapy, go for it, right? But yeah.
Yeah, so, but it wasn't, it didn't work. And the other reason is, Bree, my daughter, Brenna's mother, she didn't really connect to the grief group as much as she had hoped, because, it was a group of people that came together by time, right? These are all people that had losses of children, around the same time. But a lot of these people in the group were people that lost their children to suicide and drug overdoses. That was the majority. They weren't people that lost their children to cancer the way that she did. And for whatever reason, she basically felt that her grief was different. It wasn't the same. And she just couldn't connect to people. So she felt isolated from the group, and so there just wasn't a group that, that had cancer survivors. Kids that died of cancer at such a young age. It's very rare. So, it wasn't really the best for her. And eventually she stopped going. So for Brenna, she did participate in individual grief counseling a little bit further. But again, she was 11. Remember, I said she was a young 11. She was that young soul. So she couldn't really embrace it or open it up. And I think she just maybe wasn't ready. So her timeline is still happening, right? She's 13 now, and I'm going to talk about that. So when she's ready, we'll try again. And I am on heightened alert looking for the signs that she's approaching being ready. And I'm absolutely sure that I will notice it and will, set it up at that time. So I would say now, even though both the family and Brenna have participated in therapy, it hasn't really met the goals quite yet. But I think, 5 years from now, I'll have a different story on that.
But I love, and we'll have you back again so you can share that part, because it's a journey, like we said. But I really love that you're sharing this so honestly and openly. I mean, that's who you are. That's who we are, Audrey. But I think it's important because a lot of you guys listening, like I get messages, again, you probably do too, Audrey, because we're going to talk about your nonprofit as well. But where people say, I went to therapy, it didn't work for me. Or I went a couple times, it didn't work for me. There's a lot of different reasons why it's not quote unquote working for you at that time. I appreciate you sharing your daughter's experience. I can understand what she'd have difficulty connecting to suicide or drug overdose, or, we connect with certain parts of stories, but there was probably only up to a certain point where she was like, okay, but I, went through this journey with my child and struggling with, cancer, and it's different. We don't compare grief, right? But it's different, and you want to connect to a story. So I get that. And I appreciate you sharing that with all of us. And also with, Brenna, like you said, she's, she was a young 11. And so sometimes we all process grief at a different pace. And I think that's a big message. Another big message for everyone listening is that just because it's not the right time for you right now, or you didn't find the person that you click with or the group, be open to it happening in the future. I think that's a huge message coming from you. Yeah. And I am, again, I'm laser focused on this because I'll know when she's ready. I know you will. Yeah.
So she's 13 and a half now. It's been almost 3 years since Hayden's death. She's in the 7th grade, and she has struggled with survivor's guilt. Her family is much healthier than mine, and Hayden's presence has not been washed away like Robin's. I mean, they talk about him. His place in the family is intact. There's pictures of him, his artwork, and his stories all over the place, both in her house and in my house. So, she has adjusted better, I would say, than me in being an only living child. One thing that Bree did early on was to get her own dog. So this is Brenna's dog, not a family dog. They already have 2 family dogs. So Brenna went to the animal shelter and picked out her own dog, whose name is Luna. And they really have quite a sweet bond. Luna follows her around, jumps up when she comes home from school. They sleep together. We pick up Brenna from school once a week, and we have to stop by and get Luna so Luna can come over along with Brenna. So I think it's helped some with the isolation. Remember, she's a twin. She wasn't used to being alone. Right. And it's been a really big adjustment. And obviously a dog is, can only do what a dog can do, but it has helped. It's a little bit less quiet. She has a little bit more interaction with, this dog that absolutely loves her. So it's kind of like a sweet love story between a girl and her dog. And I would say that that was a good move and a healthy move for Brenna. So, there have been challenges. It would be unrealistic for me to say otherwise and for anybody to expect otherwise. I mean, for me, I was numb and off balance for years and years. But I've watched Brenna looking for unexpected or unhealthy changes, and I saw things. I mean, things happened, and I wasn't surprised. But everything that happened and everything that we noticed, we reacted quickly. So to things that maybe were extreme, outside of the bounds of being comfortable, maybe something that was scary or inappropriate, we sought help right away. And it really has made a huge difference. So without going into the details of the kinds of things that I saw, I guess I would, give advice to parents or grandparents who are watching their surviving sibling and maybe seeing them act out in ways that are not right, or maybe changing some of their habits in ways that you feel are unhealthy. At the very first sign of a problem, you need to bring in the cavalry. Don't wait for it to get better. It will not get better. So the cavalry can include therapy, medication, treatment programs, whatever it is. Do your research and get help right away. Because we did do this, and it really did make quite a big difference in having her get over some of these hurdles and be able to carry on and be able to go to school and to have some, have good, healthy days. So that would really be my advice. And again, I was laser focused on this. So at the first sign of a small thing, I jumped on it, and I'd say that was, that turned out to be good.
Right. I think, again, the wisdom that you've already shared with us today on this episode, I think is huge. Again, because these are questions that come up so much. And I'm so happy that parents are asking these questions and grandparents are asking these questions, and they want to know and be there for their surviving sibling or siblings in these situations. And I think what you're saying about, just be aware, obviously Brenna is young, so we're not going to go into all of those details, but your child, your grandchild, whatever the relationship is, what's out of character. I think I totally get what you're saying there. When they're not coping with something in the way, right? When it's kind of off, the train's kind of going off the tracks, and whatever that looks like for them. So I love your advice about bringing the cavalry and let's go. Yeah. And rally around that person and lift them up, because everybody needs something different. I think that's huge. Yeah. Great advice.
So Hayden and Brenna always went to separate schools. So I know for me, going back to school after Robin's death was really hard. I had teachers and students that looked at me pitifully. They asked awkward questions, and I found it to be really humiliating. But Hayden and Brenna always went to separate schools. And so, and I think a lot of the reason, because I was the one who's really kind of pushed for that, was because I wanted them to have their own life, right? Not to be so connected as twins. I thought if they had their own school and their own friends, and after school, then they can come back together. So they always went to their own school. So going back to school after Hayden's death was a lot easier for her, because nobody knew anything about him, and they didn't know she was a surviving sibling. So she really, because of that one thing, it eliminated what for me was a big pain point and something that she didn't even have to consider. So that for her, that was a good thing. She's changed. She's become a more serious student. And remember, I talked about part of well sibling as being a perfectionist. So she's no longer kind of, content with, B's, and she has gotten straight A's this year. And she would settle for no less. So I was the same way, went from being sort of very happy-go-lucky to being very driven. So definitely part of the well sibling syndrome, which is not a bad thing, but it is different. And music has taken a more prominent role in her life. And if you recall back in my episodes, I talked about, how I played the piano, and I really bonded with my sister over that. So, for me, it was a very important kind of connection between me and my sister, playing the piano. So for Brenna, it's a little bit different because they didn't really play any instruments. But shortly after Hayden's death, Brenna and I rented cellos, and we started to learn how to play together. And it was something we could do together. It was a lot of fun. She chose the cello. That was her choice.
I was going to ask him, how did you guys choose the instrument? Because I'm sure all of you listening are like, okay, if I'm going to use this as a way to cope and an outlet, how do we choose? So she chose cello. Very interesting.
Yeah, she chose cello. I think she liked strings. I think she had braces at the time, so maybe doing like a wind instrument might have not worked.
Yeah,
but
there was a correlation there. Yeah.
So she chose cello. So we rented cellos. We drove up to the music store, and she really kind of took off with it. So she joined the orchestra in school, and she was quite serious and motivated. She had other musical endeavors with recorder and other things where she didn't take it seriously at all, but she was very serious and practices every day without being reminded or anything, and really has made quite remarkable progress. And this year she got actually invited to play with the 7th and 8th grade district-wide honors orchestra, where they plucked just a few kids from each of the middle schools and put them together into a honors orchestra. So for her, it was a huge, self-esteem boost. So the music has been really important. And I just believe that music and arts can just play a prominent role in managing grief. So for Brenna, she's that young 13, expressing herself in words has been difficult. But music is a different kind of expression. And it's easier for her, as maybe drawing or painting could be for somebody else, depending on what their creative outlet of choice, would be. So I really see music as being, a healing and a healthy form of expression. So one thing we did was we wrote a song. We wrote an original song. We call it the Sib song. And it's a duet. It's a viola cello duet. So as I started to learn cello with her, I also learned viola at the same time in parallel. So I'm playing the viola, she's playing the cello. And so we composed the song together. And, the purpose, the intent of the song was to express musically her and Hayden growing up together. That's what the song tells the story of. And we have performed it a couple of times. So we incorporated it into her bat mitzvah ceremony. She's 13 and a half, so she recently had a bat mitzvah, and we played our duet as part of that. And then we also participated in an open mic night called The Final Curtain, a virtual open mic on death, dying, and grief. So it was various people performing artistic in different ways as part of an open mic. So we did it for that, and it was really quite successful. I think people really could relate to the story and relate to the song. Just for, FYI, other kinds of performances on the open mic included quite a bit of poetry, that people had written, some singing. There was a clarinet performance, and there was some dance. A couple of dance people that were doing, I think, modern dance was one. So it was, a lot of different stuff. I think, and it was very, very interesting, and I think we really enjoyed that. So we'll put a link in the show notes to our Sib song, and I think when you listen to it, you'll hear kind of that there's the two lines. There's the viola line and the cello line that represent the two children, Brenna and Hayden, growing up, and you kind of almost close your eyes and sort of sense the story of them growing up in this song. So I would like to share that. And Brenna has actively been using my nonprofit's flagship application, sibsforever.org, that we are going to talk about. I did speak at length about it in episode 5 from last season. But in a nutshell, sibsforever.org is an online memory book. So it's a secure platform, something that I wrote myself. It doesn't use Facebook or any other social media platform. So it's something I wrote myself since I'm a techie. And its purpose is to chronicle memories of siblings, of the surviving sibling, chronicling their memories by telling stories, posting pictures, posting videos. Optionally, content can be shared with friends or family or the Sibs Forever community. So you can invite your friends and family to your Sibs Forever account, and they can you could invite them so that they can help collaborate and add content, or you can invite them just to look and comment on things. So Brenna has created her Sibs Forever. I call it a Sib site to honor and document and memorialize her bond with Hayden. So she looked through all of her pictures and videos on her phone. She went out to her family Google Drive and online photo albums and chose a bunch of pictures and videos to upload. It's unlike me, because back in the 60s, we didn't have those things. So I had to take pictures of pictures. She had tons of things to choose from.
Right. Totally different time. Yeah.
Yeah. So she, she could just click and upload things. And she started to write her personal story. And there's a diary or journal feature on Sibs Forever. And she's written a couple of entries. And she uploaded the Sib song, our duet that I spoke of, and I uploaded that letter for her that she wrote to Hayden. So it's a place for all that stuff, all those memories, all those artifacts that that are memories of her and Hayden together that she can look at over the years, all in one place. She can selectively choose people to share it with or not share it with. And so I think for her, it's been, it's really been very, very healthy. One of the things that Sibs Forever has is a timeline, kind of like a Facebook timeline or wall. So she can go ahead and, add things to that, as events come up or new memories come up, and so she started to do that.
So I have to ask you before we continue to move on. I have a couple questions for you, Audree.
Sure.
So is Brenna your youngest member right now on sibsforever.org?
Yeah, I think she is. There are other teenagers, but not as young as her, because I don't know that a 13-year-old could actually go out and do it all by themselves. They would really need some oversight.
They need a little help, right? From mom or dad or grandma like you, right? So little help there. And so I wanted to ask, because when we talked about the site before, we talked about the functionality. I love it. I love how you can make it private. And if you just want it to be for yourself, that's totally cool. If you want to use it to connect with other people and share the story of your brother or sister or siblings that you've lost, you can do that as well. Or like you said, select the people that you want to share it with. So it's really personalized for you and your experience and what you're comfortable with. And it's secure. It's not like Facebook or Instagram where it's going out to everybody. So I think this is genius. And I had to ask if Brenna's your youngest user, but I think it's great that it's okay for teens to jump on there.
Yeah, and there are other teens. So there was another grandmother, quite surprisingly, and I mentioned this another time that we spoke, that a grandmother had reached out to me and wanted her grandchildren to use it. They had lost they had lost a sib to fentanyl overdose situation. It was very sad, and so so even in that case, they were a little bit older than Brenna, but it took an adult to kind of push them in the direction, like. They didn't necessarily, I don't know that they would have found it themselves. These kinds of resources are really difficult to find. And so I think for that reason that it might be difficult for somebody that young or even anybody to find it. And since I mentioned this, I do want to talk, just say one thing about another project that I'm working on that's kind of coming out of sibsforever.org. I mean, because so Sibs Forever is a nonprofit company, right? It's not really the memory book. So the flagship application is sibsforever.org, that online memory book, but there'll be other applications that the company Sibs Forever, the nonprofit, puts out. So one of the things that I learned when I was finished with at least the first version of sibsforever.org and wanted it to be a resource that people could find, that was easier said than done, right?
Oh yeah.
Because there are resources out there, but they're very, very difficult to find. And so what people do is they typically go to a search engine and, they start typing things in, but that's really not successful either. You'd have to keep kind of refining your search and clicking and then, refining it further. And people that are looking for resources aren't necessarily in a place where they can drill down that way. And web pages really aren't the right way. These things aren't really web pages, right? My application is an application. Yours is a podcast. There's Facebook groups and videos, and really search engines don't do well with that. And the big thing that they don't do well with is evaluating the quality of a result, right? They give you all these links. They could be stale. There could be disinformation. They could be, like 20 years ago. So, one of the things that has to happen is there has to be a better way to find things and a way for programmatically, automatically, the quality of the result to be evaluated. So in terms of timeliness and whether it's relevant and whether the source is really an authority or just, somebody spewing disinformation. Is it accurate? Does it match what you really are looking for? And so I decided I would take that problem on. It's actually a very, very large problem. But there's lots of resources out there. You can't find them. There's lots of lists of resources. A lot of them contain stale, outdated old links. Manually maintaining these, as many organizations do, you go and they have a list of resources. That's really not workable. So my idea was to write a Yelp-like application for online resources, beginning with grief and loss. So I would use artificial intelligence and web scraping. So I'd scrape all the stuff and then using artificial intelligence, be able to do that evaluation of the quality and the match to what a person would be looking for. So it's basically going to be an application where you can ask for a resource, let's say on surviving siblings or sibling loss, and it would accurately pinpoint relevant and appropriate resources and return those to you. And then there'd be a Yelp-like piece to it where you could go ahead and rate the resource and, and write a little review, and that would come up too, so that somebody else could see that and be able to decide whether it's a resource that they want to use. So I do have the URL, onlineresources.org, not live or anything, but it's in development, and I'm hopeful.
I was just going to ask you, can we share the website? Okay, perfect. So we can, but it will eventually be up and running. And can you guys tell Audree is our resident techie here?
Yeah,
the Surviving Sib group. I love it. No, thanks for explaining that. And this is so needed because you are spot on with this. And I know we talked about this when we've gone live and stuff before, but this needs to be in this episode, just so all of you listening know what Audree is saying is so accurate. I was not in the state of mind when that I could navigate these websites when I first lost my brother. And most of us are not. If you are, I commend you to go roll our sleeves up and Google the resources and go on every single one of these, nonprofit or resource pages or the, like you said, the podcast or wherever we're going, and actually look for whether it's an episode you're looking for that you want to relate to, or whether you're looking for a specific grief group, right? If you've lost a sibling young, there's specific groups for that. If you've lost a sibling in adulthood, there's specific groups for that. So I think this is so genius because I kind of just gave up and felt like I was totally alone for a long time, as you guys know from my story. And so when you first shared this with me, Audree, I was just elated that you're doing this and taking on more for our community. So thank you for doing that. And again, tell us the link one more time. I know it will be active in the future. But
yes, it will. So it's onlineresources.org. So one word, onlineresources.org. So because I hear all the time, just like you do, Maya, that people say, well, there's nothing for siblings. And it's simply not true. What they're saying is, I can't find anything for siblings, right? That's what they're saying. It's not that there's nothing, because there are things, but they really are almost impossible to find in any kind of a repeatable way. I mean, you couldn't even tell somebody how to find them, right? It's kind of ad hoc. Click here, look at this. So it really is it turns out that's really the problem that needs to be solved. As more books are written, more podcasts are recorded, and more applications are written, making sure people can find them when they really need them. So that's the problem I'm working on. I am a techie, as Maya said, and it's a very interesting problem, but it's really, I think, a problem that needs to be solved for this community. And it's going to begin with this community. It's going to begin with with sibling resources, then hopefully grow to other kinds of resources that people will ask for. So that's what I'm working on. Again, a big project is not. There is a page that will come up when you go to onlineresources.org, but it won't be live yet.
But we're going to include it because we want you guys to continue to follow as Audree goes along with this and start with us. So thank you for starting with surviving sibs and grief, because this is needed, just like you mentioned. I want to go back just for a second, and then we'll keep trucking along, Audree, up to Brenna and you and the cello and that experience. what advice can you give? Because I think it's really a beautiful thing. And you guys, we're going to actually play at the end of the episode. So after we conclude, you'll actually get to hear the song. So little gift for you there as well. But what advice would you give, Audree, to, again, a parent, grandparent, someone that has a child that's not a talker, which that's not me, I'm a talker, so that's how I express myself. But most people are not like that. You're right. They express themselves in different ways. So if they have an artistically inclined child, right, or someone that would lean that way, whether it's, I love how you said it can be painting or drawing or even writing poetry or all these different things, but the music, how did you, she picked the cello, but how did you identify that? Because again, I know you've been through this experience, but what advice can you give? And can you just touch on that a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I think, the first thing that I thought of exploring was, is there some kind of artistic medium, like painting or coloring? But Brenna's just not really an artistic person in that way. She never really was. So I didn't see that, that working for her. And, the music, it's not like we're really that like a super musical family, but we do enjoy music. I've played the piano my whole life. She did do some things on the recorder, and she always was that, she was always that kid that liked to bang drums. She preferred to do that than to draw. So for her, it seemed like music would be a better match. And if it wasn't, then I would have tried something else. So, she knows that I have a piano, and she knows that I like music. So for me to go to her and suggest that we learn to play a musical instrument together was not something that was, that she found to be weird. She thought, wow, that's cool. That's something I can do. So, so I tried it. I didn't know whether it'd be successful. So, but I would have tried something else if it wasn't, because she really needed some way to express herself that wasn't verbal. That part I think was very clear to me. But I have to say that it has been so much fun learning how to play cello with her. It's been like a total blast. So in addition to being expression, it's something that we're doing together, right? We're navigating learning cello together. And it's really just fun for both of us. We both look forward to it.
And I think that's beautiful. And I think that's also a really beautiful message. But I just wanted to make sure we kind of gave that advice to all of you guys listening or wanting to help someone express themselves in their own way, because not everybody is, going to do a podcast or start a nonprofit or start an application or a resource page, and everyone's going to handle it differently and move at a different pace and express themselves in different ways. But yeah, I can tell you're having fun. So much fun that you wanted to learn another instrument, Audree. That's so you. That's so you. Well, sibling syndrome is still at it, right? So it's why it's so important. We talked about this today. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because again, I think it's wonderful what you guys have done. And again, you guys will hear the song at the end of the episode. But yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah. So yeah, I think once you have well sibling syndrome, you don't like get over it. It's right. It's like a permanent thing. And that idea of putting, being that perfectionist and always driving for one more thing, like one instrument wasn't enough. Yeah, that's exactly part of the syndrome. So, but she has had a very good time with Sibs Forever, and I think for her having all that stuff there, even she is enjoying it now. But I think it's going to even be more meaningful, for her later. Like when I first did my Sib site, and I again had to take pictures of pictures, and I didn't obviously have any video, but I did put a few videos up there that, at least of me and my brother talking about my sister. But I really do enjoy going back and looking at them and kind of reliving some of the things, the adventures that we had. And even, looking at the pictures sometimes will prompt me to want to write something if I do get sort of a memory. And so having it in one place and being able to, enjoy looking at it and maybe refining it and inviting other people who might have known, in her case, Hayden, to look at it. It's really, I think, really great over time. So one of the things, that I did, as I said, I've been in therapy a long time, and I did have that seething anger that I talked about. That's part of the well sibling syndrome and unbelievable survivor's guilt. So my therapist suggested that I write a letter to Robin that would potentially minimize that anger, or at least and that guilt, at least talk about it, at least, tell her how I felt, tell her about it. And so I did upload it to my Sib site, which I have, with me and Robin. So I was gonna share it with you. It's a personal letter, but it'll give you an idea of the kind of thing that maybe you could do. I mean, obviously, Brenna wrote Hayden a letter, and this letter, even though I never got a chance to say it to Robin, it's for her, and I have to believe that she has heard it. So let me go ahead.
I believe she has, Audree. So tell us. I can't wait to hear this. I love that you're sharing this with us. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. When did you, because I know you've been in therapy and it's been such a big part. And again, you've talked about it, season 2, episodes 4 and 5, and how life-changing. And I always talk about how life-changing therapy was and has been and will continue probably to be for the rest of my life. When did you write this letter? Just to give us some context.
Yeah. So when Hayden first got sick, I mean, I was so busy kind of focused on the clinical trial and including Brenna, everything. I didn't even feel like anything. I just basically froze, right? And I was just, my head was down and I was trying to do all these things. I needed to be there for my daughter who's going to lose a child. I had already watched my mother lose a child. So, I was just really I was just like motoring through. But after he passed, then it was like this, everything was just triggered. Like I almost like, I could barely get out of bed. I mean, it was so bad. I mean, I just felt like I was back at 12 years old, back just learning that Robin had died. I felt like I had failed her. I failed Hayden. I wasn't, it was just so terrible. So I started back in therapy. And, in the beginning, I really just had to, get a lot of that triggering dealt with so that I could basically be okay and, start to enjoy some of my days again. It was just very, very difficult. So as I got healthier, we talked about all these things, that I was going through and what it was like back in when Robin died, what it's like now. She would give me assignments. And so she's given me many assignments. She's really, my therapist likes assignments and I like to write. So it's a good match. So, she gave me, many assignments to, write about how I felt about this and what could I have done differently, really, and what was it like to be 12 years old and in that situation. So, I wrote a lot of things. And I did start to feel better, but, it's a long process. You don't get rid of the anger and the sadness, right away. And so at some point she said, you know what, you had Brenna write Hayden a letter. Why don't you write Robin a letter? And she actually suggested that I put it into some kind of like a little bottle and send it up with a balloon. I didn't do that. She did suggest that because, for me, it really wouldn't have meant anything. But, I did write it and I did read it out loud to Robin, just like I'm going to read it out loud to you. And I felt that, that she heard me and, it was comforting to me. So it was part of a bunch of assignments, but I'd say it was as I was at least feeling like I understood myself better and why I basically had backtracked the way that I had and with all this emotion that every time I thought I was getting seriously though, every time over the years in therapy, I would say, okay, I'm not angry anymore. And then something would happen and I would say, no, I'm still angry. Yep. And then years later, it'd be, okay, I'm not angry anymore. And then something would happen and say, no, I'm still angry. So, I went back to therapy and it was like, I told her, I said, I'm sure I'm not angry anymore. And then we talked and it was like, you know what? I'm still really angry.
Right. That kind of, could come to, yourself moment and you're like, okay, I'm still angry. Like, let's work on this. Yeah. Really being honest with yourself. Yeah.
So it's a long, long road, to get rid of that kind of guilt and the anger. It's so deep seated that, you can sort of carve off a little piece, shave off a piece and feel like you've made progress, but there's still so much there that you still have to work on.
Right.
So the writing was really helpful. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I did see a medium, and I referred to this in the letter, so that's why I'm mentioning it here. But I did see a medium, and the medium actually put this really sweet picture in my head of Hayden and Robin growing up together. So, that was in my mind, and I really liked that picture. So my letter goes like this. Dear Robin, when I re-listened to the session I had with the medium back in December of 2021, she said that you and Hayden were growing up together, and the years separating the two of you didn't matter. I love the picture that this creates in my mind. For most of my life, I've been guilty about how I treated you when we were sisters here on earth. I pushed the guilt away for many years, but it never went away. And I'm sorry, Robin, that I didn't show you the tolerance and love and compassion when you were struggling. But truthfully, I didn't even know what those things were back then. Our parents were not the best ones to model these traits. They were so inexperienced and damaged themselves. They tried hard to get you to have friends, but they never suggested that we become friends. I didn't even know how to be a friend, and I struggled with being friendless myself. 5th grade was a nightmare for me, as I'm sure you remember. I'm sure I took some of that out on you. I lived in the same house as you. I saw the same dysfunction, impatience, and cruelty as you did. But I didn't have the tools or the maturity to rise above it as a child. But I am sure that had we grown into adulthood together, we would have overcome all of this and become true sisters and best friends. We would have understood each other in a way that no one else ever could, and I would have loved that. I've struggled with guilt and self-loathing over this for more years than I care to count. Recently, I have acquired a new level of understanding, and I genuinely want to get past this guilt, be able to close my eyes and feel your love. I built my nonprofit, Sips Forever, for us. I don't have a lot of memories, but I have deep emotions and longings, which I will continue to explore. And I know in my heart that you understand and forgave me long ago. And Robin, take care of my sweet warrior grandson, Hayden, and know that I love you both very, very much.
Oh my gosh. Woo. This is off to an emotional season, Audree. Oh my gosh. It takes a lot to get tears in my eyes, but that was beautiful. That was beautiful. I feel like Robin heard you again right now. So I think this is a beautiful exercise to do. And I think, tell me yourself, like, were you surprised at some of the things that came out when you were writing this beautiful note? And was it kind of just flowing out of you? Tell us a little bit about your experience with that.
Yeah. So the assignment was basically to write her a letter and be totally, honest and transparent with how I felt. And I was pretty well aware then that I was, still angry and still pretty guilty. So yeah, it came pretty quick because I think it was all there. I mean, I don't have a lot of memories, as I said. I was 12, but when you look back, when you're an adult and you look back at 12, you wish you had done, but I couldn't. And I wanted her to know that I couldn't, but it didn't mean that things, had she grown up, of course, we would be close. We would be the sisters that I always wanted. I mean, I've missed her every day since she's been gone. But to be able to write it and to read it to her and know that she heard me and that she's with Hayden, my sweet grandson Hayden, was very important to me. And I did feel kind of a sense of relief, and I just felt better that I was better understood.
Yeah. And we've talked about seeing a medium because both of us have done that. And I agree with you. I think it can be exceptionally healing. It can bring you a sense of peace and another piece of the puzzle and being able to move forward because we never move on. Many years later, you're talking about Robin and, Brenna will talk about Hayden and you'll talk about Hayden for many years to come and for the rest of your life. And we know that, but I think, we've talked about this before and we've talked about it on this podcast many times. I think a medium, if you're open to it and it aligns with what you believe in and you picked it carefully because you want to make sure you're going to someone very credible, I always like add that disclaimer. It can be so helpful. It was very helpful for me as I've shared and you have shared as well in past episodes and in this episode as well. And I really love that you've got that image. And
I love that. I mean, that picture of the two of them together, because she said, she was a very good medium, and she visualized Robin one close from the '60s and Hayden. She said,
wow.
but the time doesn't matter, right? It just doesn't matter. They're two children of the same age, basically, growing up together. And, I just felt so good, with that picture in my head. So I am going to go back. I haven't gone back to see her, but I am going to, I did reach out to her. And so I am going to schedule another session with her and see if she has some additional pictures for me to.
Yeah, I'm sure, because they're together and they're growing together. And I think, I don't know if you realize that you're bringing up another incredible point here, Audree, but, time is different. I believe this fully, but, time is a concept here on earth that we have, right? And then when you pass over on the other side, I don't know, I'm not, whatever you believe in, God, universe, whatever it is, but I connect so much when you tell me that story about going to see the medium and that they're actually growing together wherever they are, somewhere beautiful, I know, but depending on your beliefs, some people think heaven, some people think, there's another life, whatever. I just think that that's a really amazing thing to understand too, that, we have this concept of time, but when you move on and you move, when you pass away, there's a different kind of concept. And the fact that she was able to give you that gift to talk about that, I just love that part of your story. I think it's awesome.
That's why I want to go back. She doesn't see anybody, beyond, you can't go back before a year. So, you have to wait a full year. It's been more than a year, but not that much more. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a common thing with mediums who are talking to you about the passing of someone, especially when it's quite recent, because there needs to be time for both you and that person that has passed away to, you both have to have time. Like, you can't just go see a medium like every week and like, it's not therapy. It's not like that. So I'm so glad you brought that up. That's huge. That's when you'll also know, like, if there's someone really legitimate, because they're not going to ask you to come back all the time. There's a lot of signs, but that's one of them. They want you to move forward with your life. And then, the ones that you've lost will continue to move forward. And it's about reconnecting and hearing what you need to hear.
That's right. So she said people come back, sometimes after a year, sometimes after 5 years, but you're right. It's, you have to reach a different point so that there's something that she'll be able to tell you about this new time.
Yeah, exactly. I think, again, I'm so glad we talked about that. Audree, tell us a little bit about Sibs. We've talked about Sibs Forever. You guys need to go on sibsforever.org. I'm there. You'll find me there. You'll find Audree there, and lots of surviving siblings there and families. But tell us a little bit about, we talked about, the functionalities and, what we can do there. Tell us, are there any future plans that you want to share with us, or anything else to kind of wrap up the conversation about sibsforever.org? Anything else, any tidbits you want to share with us besides your resource website, which I'm so excited about too?
So I am working on onlineresources.org. I have a whole set of new functionality I would love to do for sibsforever.org, but probably not going to happen until after online resources, because I really feel like that problem needs to be solved first.
I agree.
So that all these things can be found. But I really want to encourage people to go out there. It's free. It's a nonprofit. It will always be there. I am a computer person with a background in privacy and security. So there'll never be any leaks or data stolen or any of that stuff that you read about. It's really easy. Just go out there and create your account, and simple to upload. If you have any questions or anything, any feedback of any sort, just reach out to me. There's a button for contact me, or contact Sibs Forever, but that goes directly to me. So you should feel free to do that. I respond to everything. I'm very responsive. So I just would welcome everybody out there and just give it a shot.
Absolutely. I agree. I just love what you've done. And I'm so glad that you're back on this season and sharing, and you were able to share a little bit more in depth about Brenna's journey and Hayden's journey, and also this journey for more resources, and obviously sibsforever.org.
And the Sib song that you're gonna
the Sib song that we're gonna close out with. And before we do that, Audree, so obviously they can find you sibsforever.org. It will be linked here and also on every single episode, because we want to thank Audree for supporting season 3. You're incredible. I just appreciate your support so much, and I'm sure all of you do as well, so we can tell all these incredible stories for season 3. Audree, is there anything else you want to add in this episode before we close out with this incredible song with you and Brenna?
No, but I just want to say, how much I've enjoyed recording the podcast with you, Maya. I think what you're doing really, really is important. I want your resources to be able to be found easily. But what you're doing, what you're doing is great. And I actually am looking forward to continuing to work with you, maybe with some workshopping or whatever it is we do. I have a feeling that you and I will be together in various ways going forward, and helping this community in every way that we can.
I agree, Audrey. We've done some work and we've started it, but we've got more to do and a long way to go. We want to keep telling these stories and keep helping all of you surviving siblings out there. So we're going to turn it over to this beautiful, beautiful song, and it's called the Sib Song, right?
That's right. It's the Sib Song, a story of Hayden and Brenna.
Story of Hayden and Brenna, and it is by Brenna and you. So yes. I will turn it over to that. And thank you so much for being here again, Audrey. We appreciate you so much here at the Surviving Siblings podcast.
Thank you, Maya. I really enjoyed this recording this session. It's been great.
Thank you so much for listening to the Surviving Siblings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it for you, then share it on your chosen social media platform. And don't forget to tag us at Surviving Siblings Podcast so that more surviving siblings can find us. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Surviving Siblings Podcast. All links can be found in the show notes, so be sure to check those out too. Thank you again for the support. Until the next episode, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.